Divorce Court, where your honey gets the money. Weekdays.
No one works a 36-hour day. No one, that is, except young doctors in training, interns and residents, who are on call in hospitals for 36 hours at a time. The 36-hour day is a story about how their long hours, their fatigue, and their inexperience create career-long resentments, affect their judgments, and can have tragic consequences for patients.
You'd much rather have somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're having chest pain who's alert and oriented and not been up for a long time. It's just common sense.
Why do people buy it?
Well, it's the ultimate sort of outlaw statement, isn't it? It's a car that would just frighten you to death if you had the slightest doubt of your ability to drive it. I mean, to suddenly have somebody throw you the keys and say, would you mind driving my car home, and walk out into a dark parking lot and see this thing sort of glowering at you. You would call a taxi, you'd do almost anything, bring in an airlift, but you certainly wouldn't want to jump into it and drive it.
They call themselves fundamentalist Mormons, and they live in the largest polygamous community in the United States. Don Timpson had a dozen or more mothers and 79 brothers and sisters. His two wives are Janet and Mary.
What's your relationship with Janet?
She's a sister. Sister wife, we say.
She's a sister who sleeps with your husband.
But a sister, yeah. She definitely sleeps with my husband. She has 4 children.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Harry Reasoner.
I'm Ed Bradley.
I'm Diane Sawyer. Those stories and Andy Rooney, tonight on 60 Minutes.
Hey, where were you? I was talking to the diving board. Turns out we share the same family tree.
What's this?
It's your large Coca-Cola from Mickey D's.
All of this?
I got myself a super summer-sized Coke and a milkshake and a mega-sized order of fries. They're all larger than large for a limited time only.
You saying all of this is for you?
Hey, man, if you don't understand what I'm saying, we're both in trouble.
Super summer sizes.
Only at McDonald's. Quit showing off.
Thanks to me and factory incentives, you Isuzu dealers can now offer some truly incredible deals. The Isuzu Pup, America's lowest priced import truck, now only $3. The Impulse and Trooper 2 also come with factory incentives like a comprehensive dental plan. And for the first 10,000 customers, we'll throw in a free chauffeur. You have my word on it. Very good.
Hurry, for a limited time you can save big at your participating Isuzu dealer. Truly.
The 36-hour day. Nobody works a 36-hour day. No one, that is, except young doctors in training, interns and residents, who are on call in hospitals for 36 hours at a time, 100 hours or more a week. They are the doctors responsible for much of the patient care in most teaching hospitals. They are supervised, some of the time, by senior doctors of the hospital faculty and by attending doctors, the patient's private physicians. As we said when we first broadcast this piece 4 months ago, this is a story about how interns and residents' long hours and inexperience can affect their judgment and have tragic consequences sometimes for their patients. But this is also a story about fear. Fear on the part of young interns to talk publicly about all this. Fear that their fledgling medical careers will be destroyed by a medical establishment that doesn't want the system revealed or changed. Dr. X is an exception. He had interned at a major Washington, D.C. teaching hospital. He is now a second-year resident at another. But they refused to let us follow him on his 36-hour rounds or to watch him work at all. Nonetheless, Dr. X agreed to describe for us what intern and resident life is really like, as long as we didn't use his name. We had our conversation at a neighborhood restaurant. The afternoon we talked, Dr. X told us he was coming off a 32-hour shift. He began by warning us never to enter a hospital for treatment in July because, he said, that's the month the new class of interns begins to train.
July is a very dangerous month in the hospital.
Why?
Everybody's new, they don't know their way around the hospital quite often, and they don't necessarily know what they're doing.
And what kind of thing can go wrong with a new intern, a tired intern?
Certainly, writing orders in the wrong chart is a very common thing, especially in the morning when you're going on rounds. You have a whole rack full of charts, and they all look the same.
Dr. X and his brethren have so much responsibility because much of the time, The experienced private physician, the attending doctor, the person you pay to take care of you, is nowhere to be seen. Infrequently at night, almost never on Sunday. When you call an attending, he's at home asleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And you say, "Doctor, this is Doctor.
Right.
I got a little trouble here."
Yeah.
By and large, what are they like?
By and large, they're not very helpful. Sometimes I've heard people say, "Don't call me back even if the patient dies."
Are you going to care for a patient as well in your 30th hour as you did in your 3rd hour on duty?
Definitely not. People are much more forgetful, less attentive to detail, less able to concentrate after that kind of sleep deprivation.
Inexperience, long hours, fatigue. Just ask newspaperman Sid Zion and his wife Elsa. Their 18-year-old daughter Libby was running a high fever and suffering from a painful ear infection. It was a Sunday night, so their family doctor, Ray Sherman, sent them to the emergency room at New York Hospital. When you got to the hospital and you went to the emergency room and the doctors greeted you, did you know who they were, whether they were regular attending or residents or interns or whatever?
My assumption was that since this was the great hospital, it was an attending doctor, and since my friend Ray Sherman had sent me there, he wouldn't send me to an intern. I had no idea until we finally looked at medical records and saw the autopsy report that what we were dealing here with were interns and residents the whole time, and not one attending.
As New York Hospital's records reveal, it was the intern and some residents who failed to use antibiotics to fight Zion's fever and her infection. The first-year intern, Dr. Louise Weinstein, had already been on duty here at the hospital for 18 hours straight when she first saw Libby Zion. Zion's temperature kept on going up. She was thrashing around in her bed. But Dr. Weinstein refused 3 separate telephone requests from the nurses to come to Libby Zion's bedside. Over the telephone, Weinstein, who by now had been on duty for more than 18 hours, ordered the patient tied to her bed to stop her thrashing. Elsa Zion is Libby's mother.
No one looked at her at all. They tied her down so that she wouldn't bother them and gave her drugs to quiet her down and get her out of the way.
One of those drugs was Demerol, although it was on Miss Zion's record that she was already taking the antidepressant drug Nardil, and mixing Demerol and Nardil can be fatal. The Zions checked Libby into New York Hospital before midnight. Reluctantly, they left her 3 hours later. Just 5 hours after that, their telephone rang. It was intern Weinstein on the phone.
She said, "I just want you to know that we've done everything we could do. We tried to get her temperature down. We put her in ice, and she said, we've done everything we could." And I said to her, "Are you trying to tell me she's dead?" And she said, "Yes."
Citing a pending malpractice suit, none of the doctors involved in the Zion case would talk to us. When we did reach Dr. Louise Weinstein at New York Hospital, where she still works, she hung up on us. The hospital's attorneys write that as the true facts and circumstances concerning Miss Zion's death emerge, we are confident that her care will be shown to have been appropriate. A New York grand jury that investigated the Libby Zion case issued a report condemning the practice of permitting the most seriously ill patients to be cared for by the most inexperienced physicians. And they recommended that hospitals be required to supervise interns and junior residents and to limit their long working hours. One of the Zion's expert witnesses is Dr. John Alexander. He has practiced emergency medicine for 10 years. He was hired by the Zions to examine Libby's medical records and to assess the quality of the care that she received. You yourself write about Dr. Weinstein. Dr. Weinstein's admitting orders essentially doomed Miss Zion insofar as any reasonable opportunity for recovery was denied the patient subsequent to Dr. Weinstein's assumption of care. Pretty serious indictment.
That's correct. What Dr. Weinstein did or did not do took from Libby Zion any opportunity she had to live to see the morning.
Virtually no hospital wanted us to observe an intern at work for 36 hours straight. No hospital wanted us to see just how tired these young doctors in training can get. Mount Sinai in Manhattan was the exception. From 7 a.m. on Tuesday, December 17th until 7 p.m. on Wednesday, December 18th, we stayed with first-year intern Jeff Levy. You have been quoted as saying that patients are the bane of your existence.
I did say that at one point.
Yeah, why?
Patients can be very, very demanding. Patients can also be very, very sick and have very legitimate demands.
Levy's first 12 hours passed fairly uneventfully. Patient rounds, chart reviews, the scrutiny of x-rays. It's now 7:30 p.m. Jeff Levy's night at Mount Sinai is just beginning, with a woman suffering from internal bleeding.
At the same time that she was having...
8 p.m., 13 hours into the job, only 23 hours to go.
GI bleed, here we go.
8:45 p.m., a shouting match breaks out in one of the patient's rooms.
I understand why she's here. I am well aware of why she's here.
Do something about it.
There is absolutely nothing I can do. There are no other female beds.
Well, then fine, we'll take it home.
No, I don't want you to do that. She needs to be in the hospital.
You can't take this aggravation.
How much sleep have you had over the last 36?
Oh, let's see. Went to bed at 2:30, woke up at... No, went to bed at 3, woke up at 4:30. We'll see. She needs any more blood. Was up for about a half hour. And went back to bed at 5 and slept till 6:30, so I got about 3 hours of sleep. She was told...
It's now 8:30 Wednesday morning. Dr. Levy has been on call for 25 hours straight. There's a simple way to distinguish day from night at most hospitals. In the morning, the senior doctors, those men in suits and ties, are there to get the interns and residents' reports.
However, she continued to take the aspirin and presented yesterday with the above-mentioned melanoma.
10 a.m. A visibly tired Jeff Levy tries to concentrate on the cases at hand. Just compare the face of Dr. Levy this morning with the Dr. Levy of 24 hours earlier. I've heard from some attendings and from some residents that interns and residents don't care the way they used to.
There's a saying in medicine, it's called in the days of the giants. When I was an intern, we used to do things like this. Could you please ask me the part of the question again?
Yeah. You're tired?
Yeah. But I'm not taking care of patients. I'm done with my work.
I know.
Okay.
But you're tired.
No question.
And at the end of a 36-hour, I mean, you'd be less than human if you weren't. And one has got to wonder. I mean, come on, if you have a little bit of trouble keeping some of my questions in mind, I say, is this the guy that I want taking care of me if I'm sick? In his 32nd or 33rd hour?
It goes back, I think, to the sense of judgment. You learn to know when you're tired. You learn to know when to ask for help.
Peter Cherub is a third-year resident now, and he says he'll never forget what his first year was like.
The most unpleasant, miserable experience I've ever been through. I remember being here for 36 hours straight, no sleep, my clothes sticking to me, nurses constantly asking me questions, almost usually too tired to even think. I remember IVs falling out at 4 o'clock in the morning. The minute I'd gotten into bed, I thought that someone pulled them out. I was so exhausted and exasperated. The quality of medical care would improve with shorter hours and better working conditions. Because you'd much rather have somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're having chest pain who's alert and oriented and not been up for a long time. It's just common sense.
Do interns get tired only at Mount Sinai? Of course not. Tom Pearson is also a young intern, fresh out of medical school, interning at the Polyclinic Medical Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It was Friday afternoon when 60 Minutes producer Marion Golden caught up with him. He'd been at the hospital since Thursday morning, much of that time in the intensive care unit.
I've seen 34 hours continuously nonstop, and that's about as far as I can go. And somewhere around 24 hours is where you start to cry. And somewhere before that, you might hallucinate now and then. Definitely lose track of what day it is. Inevitably, I will lose a day.
What kinds of errors are you and your colleagues capable of making?
About as many different kinds as there are drugs to give. There are specific indications for a lot of these chemicals that we push into people's bodies, and there's no way to remember them all.
One of your colleagues says he's thinking seriously of quitting. Patients are ungrateful. He's found himself becoming cynical beyond his wildest dreams or expectations. Is that recognizable to you?
I'm almost afraid to be honest because I know that there's a slim possibility the public may hear this, but in all honesty, I find myself at times resenting my patients. They take my time. Sometimes they don't appreciate it. Sometimes they don't get better. Many times I get up in the morning thinking to myself, I should have stayed in horticulture. If there was anything else in the world that I could do other than this, I would do it.
The patient is the enemy. That is a sentiment as astonishing as any these doctors were willing to express. These doctors even use acronyms like GOMER to describe their least favorite patients. GOMER? A subspecies of human being, usually old and senile, incontinent, or drug-saturated, that the doctors want nothing to do with. What does GOMER stand for? Get out of my emergency room.
No question about the fact that in some ways and at many times the patient is almost your enemy.
If these dark thoughts are frightening to patients, they worry doctors too. Some of them, like these interns and residents at Harrisburg's Polyclinic, even take part in encounter sessions to ventilate their concerns.
Your mind is just so messed up from having been up all night. I go home after call being very depressed. It happens every single time I'm on call. And when I go home, I say, oh, there's my post-call depression. Don't pay any attention to it because tomorrow you'll feel better again.
We are dealing with the most grim thing in life, and that's death. We see it every day. I mean, we are able to accept death on a patient and be able to walk out of the room and just like nothing happened.
What bothers me about death, there's a certain amount of paperwork. You fill it out, you go on to your next job. But seriously, the thing is that you feel bad and scared because you wonder always, is it something that you did or didn't do?
It's not like you're going to become a subspecialist.
No, I'm going to quit. The level of cynicism and acerbic behavior that I've developed is not healthy for me or the people I'm going to treat.
Why do we continue to train doctors this way? Tradition. It's the macho thing to do. Economics. They're a source of cheap labor for so many hospitals. They earn an average of $23,000 a year. Dr. Richard Gorland, chairman of the Department of Medicine at Mount Sinai, insists it's the only way for a doctor to learn. It is also, he says, the best way to take care of patients. Why are interns and residents on duty treating patients for 36 hours in a row?
The most important reason they're treating patients for 36 hours in a row is our concept of continuity of care.
What do you mean?
Illnesses aren't like snapshots. They aren't something that happens in an hour or 2 hours. It's usually taking somebody through an illness, a phase of an acute illness that might be, for example, diabetic coma. That is a drama that acts out over a day and a half. That's the first part. The second is the experience that the individual gets in taking care of the patient. We don't want it to be chopped up. We view this as a period within which a person learns to cope. And if you're constantly going on and off duty, there's the likelihood that you'll never learn to cope with a total problem. You never will have seen that total problem. And you don't understand how not to make mistakes at times when perhaps you are a little tired.
And sometimes when you're going to make mistakes, and who suffers? Sure, the doctor suffers to a certain degree, but the patient suffers seriously.
We don't let the patient suffer, because every single move that is of consequence, this is cleared with the resident. And during the day, of course, there are attendings, consultants, all participating in any major decision.
Ideally, yes, mistakes do happen. And you know that they do. True?
Mistakes can happen in any situation.
Dr. John Alexander contends that mistakes can happen all too often under the present system.
It often does determine who shall live and who shall die in a hospital emergency setting. Yes, sir.
You mean the burnout factor, the fatigue factor, the resentment factor?
It's a little bit of a roulette wheel that a patient takes unknowingly when they come into a hospital emergency room. Who's going to treat them? All you can do is have faith in the name of the hospital whose logo appears in lights outside the emergency room door.
And that faith is sometimes misplaced.
I believe so.
Some extraordinary things have happened in the 4 months since we first broadcast this piece. New York Hospital, where Libby Zion died, has admitted it did provide inadequate care to Ms. Zion, and the hospital has paid a $13,000 fine. 2 of the residents who treated Zion have been charged by New York State with gross incompetence and/or gross neglect in her death. The New York State Health Department is also proposing what amounts to a revolution in medical care. They would limit sharply the number of hours that interns, residents, and staff physicians are on duty. Interns and residents now on call for 36 hours straight would work no more than 12 or 16 hours at a time. And California is considering similar reforms.
Taste summer. Drink it in. Scoop it out. Eat it all. Taste summer. Taste summer. Taste summer.
Right now. Cool, creamy, refreshing ice cream. Summer just wouldn't be summer without it.
Taste summer.
To us at UPS, this is a custom car. Why, this beauty's been modified dozens of times. It has a fiberglass fuel-efficient front, a rapid opening foam-filled door, and a sunroof, all of which makes us more efficient, so we can deliver next-day air for up to half what other companies charge, and allow our drivers to be seen in one mean set of wheels. UPS, we run the tightest ship in the shipping business.
You know, Jerry, you're a terrific husband and a super salesman.
Hey, Beth, what is this?
A financial genius. You're not.
Very few of us are. We can help. At New York Life, we have the resources to make the most of your resources. We offer a range of financial opportunities, including mutual funds, universal life, and limited partnerships. Don't settle for less than you deserve. Get the most out of life with New York Life.
Tonight on Murder, She Wrote.
All the Rinaldi evidence is gone.
A TV star is murdered and an innocent man is framed. Can Jessica rewrite the killer's script? Murder, She Wrote. Then the nightmare of divorce.
He's drained the bank account. He's cut off my credit cards. I don't get paid for 6 days, and I got $30 to feed the 4 of us.
But when Lynette Harding finds the courage to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, will she learn to give love another chance? Margot Kidder, James Ferrantino, picking up the pieces.
That's the way these things are done.
Tonight.
If there is one consuming passion in this country, it is with cars. If there's one consuming passion in Italy, it is with cars. If there is truly a dream car to satisfy those passions, the name it bears is this, Lamborghini. Being a dream, it is, of course, utterly impractical. Price about $120,000, space, 2 seats, no trunk. Since we first broadcast Lamborghini last April, the company's been taken over by the Chrysler Corporation, causing some anxiety among automobile purists who are concerned that Chrysler wants to increase production from about 200 cars a year to 2,000. As we will see, one thing the car is not is a product of the production line. A vineyard in central Italy. A 70-year-old gentleman farmer who still gets a thrill from tending his own vines. The end of another day. Time to put away the tractor and let the other thrills begin. His name is Ferruccio Lamborghini. The tractor he was driving was a Lamborghini. The car he is driving is a Lamborghini. The speed he is going is pure Lamborghini. Signor Lamborghini no longer owns the company that bears his name. It was lost to a business group after he ran into financial difficulties. But he is the father of this model. He got into the car business in 1963, having become dissatisfied with the best of Italian high-performance cars. Watch this red one perform, and you will understand why he is now satisfied. We do not advise anyone to drive at these speeds on public roads. Valentino Balboni, the test driver, is licensed to do it and does it brilliantly. Brakes are just something. company does not have a test track. Our cars are built for the road, it says.
It's a thrilling ride, I must say.
The broken lines fly by like tracer bullets, or get eaten up like some supersonic Pac-Man. This is no special effect. This is 180 miles an hour.
You find it relaxing?
Yes, yes. With this car, yes.
16 years ago, Lamborghini, with a team of engineers, designed and began to build his ultimate road car. It remains today the fastest production car available. 180, even 195 miles an hour. And about the most expensive, about $120,000. When it was unveiled in the early 70s, it had no name, but a local reporter took one look and said, Countach, which translates loosely as holy cow, and the name stuck. Some vital statistics for the true car fanatic. The engine has 12 cylinders, each of them with 4 valves. It develops almost 500 horsepower. The rear tires are almost 14 inches wide. The brakes are enormous vented discs that are to stopping what those 12 cylinders are to moving. The gearbox has 5 speeds. You would normally shift into 5th at about 140 miles an hour. And from a standing start to 30 seconds later, you are closer to 200 miles an hour than to 100 miles an hour. The Lamborghini factory in Sant'Agata is, despite the futuristic look of the car, an oasis of old-fashioned artisanship. The Countach barely uses any bought-in, subcontracted parts. Everything from engine block to gearbox is made right here, and most things made by hand, just like a good suit. There are no robots, only people who began their careers as teenage apprentices. The place is as clean as a surgery, and the machine as thoroughly tested as a fighter plane. All of which means that peak production is 3 cars a week. The waiting list for one is more than a year. Is this the Lamborghini Countach for everyone, for every driver, for everyone who can afford it?
No, I think it's a special car for special people.
Daniela Adetto is the marketing director for the Countach. Is there such a thing as a typical Lamborghini purchaser, a typical owner?
Yes, very large ego, because if you're shy, you cannot go around with this car. It's like to go out in the evening with a beautiful woman. Not everybody can afford, not because they don't have enough money or because they have enough power, but because they are not the type that like to go out with a very beautiful woman. Because, you know, this white car is like a beautiful virgin. If you see the red, it's like a mature woman. If you see the black one, it's like an intriguing woman, you know?
What are its weaknesses?
The weakness is that it's not a very comfortable car, of course. You cannot go with baggages, etc. You must have another car, like a Rolls Royce, that follow you with a chauffeur and arrive the day later, the day after, with all the baggages. And of course, you cannot go with children, or you must have only a beautiful woman, and that's it.
Even now, 16 years after it was launched, it still regularly makes the covers of the motoring magazines. Probably the most written about car ever built, possibly overwritten about. For example, devastatingly defiant in looks. Just light the fuse and keep steering. Uncompromisingly arrogant. Another writer says, like tasting beer for the first time or losing one's virginity, seeing a Countach is an experience never forgotten. Another writer, here we are talking about the brutal throb of a predator, the same that vibrates in a cheetah waiting to pounce on a gazelle. It is hard to find anyone to question the value of the Countach. Even David Davis, editor and publisher of Automobile Magazine and one of America's toughest car critics, is smitten. It's probably overpriced.
Yeah, Hemingway said that pheasant shooting was worth whatever you had to pay for it, and I think that's probably true with Lamborghini driving, too.
There's no trunk space.
None whatsoever. And what trunk space there is immensely hot. It would not be a place to carry a box of chocolates.
Why do people buy it?
Well, it's the ultimate sort of outlaw statement, isn't it? It's in a time when, you know, we've got the Center for Automotive Safety and all of those people on one side and the Baptists on the other trying to sort of corral us and make us behave the way we're supposed to. You can very quickly establish yourself as being somewhere else just by parking one of those in front of your house. It's a car that would just frighten you to death if you had the slightest doubt of your ability to drive it. I mean, to suddenly have somebody throw you the keys and say, would you mind driving my car home, and walk out into a dark parking lot and see this thing sort of glowering at you. You would call a taxi, you'd do almost anything, bring in an airlift, but you certainly wouldn't want to jump into it and drive it. The whole idea, the whole environment that's created by that car on a given stretch of road is just, that's another matter altogether. You can't accomplish that in a Buick Roadmaster.
As you may have already noticed, this car is not for everyone. The doors are a wondrous piece of engineering, but getting in can require a certain degree of agility. The windows open to mere slits through which you can't even toss a token into a toll booth. As for the rear window, if you can call it that, forget reversing without the aid of someone to direct you, or do what the test drivers do. Heads up, bottoms out. If you can live without those little compromises to comfort and safety, and have the cash, you might just fall in love with this little number. One writer says, it is not what the Countach can do for you that counts, but what it does to others. That is certainly true. Anywhere the Countach goes, it stops traffic dead. Even right here in Sant'Agata, where the car is built, the presence of one is an event.
Costa di meno, costerà 250. Ma perché aprite?
Or the streets of Manhattan, even the most jaded people on earth stop and gawk with respect and envy and awe.
I love this car, man. I love this car.
And misinformation.
Oh shit, you got a jacuzzi in the back. Yeah? You see that red button over there? It says eject. But you eject the other way, you know, for you. Yo, fellas, anybody want to take a ride? The keys are in it. No, the guy must not know New York too well, man, to be leaving keys in the Lamborghini.
It is the toy for the man who has everything. So, of course, the man who does have everything, the millionaire publisher, balloonist, oldest and richest Hell's Angel on earth, Malcolm Forbes, has one. How do New Yorkers respond to it when you bring it into town?
They respond the same way you and I would if we saw one. They stop, they whistle. Cars pull up beside you, and whether they're in a Cadillac or an old pickup truck, they whistle. They roll the window down. They say, "What's the name of this car? How much?" You know, and you go by and you get a toot from other cars, and they give you the sign. Isn't it great? Everybody shares enthusiasm for the car. People don't resent it like they do, say, a stretch limousine that takes 10 minutes to get around the corner, and the tinted dark glasses, all, you know, all the crap. There's nothing junky about this. There's nothing put on about it. It's pure.
I firmly believe that everyone who is worth anything at all should own a 12-cylinder car before they die, because there's nothing else like it. It's just one of the great operatic experiences of all time. It's a real noise, and there's nothing else like it. It'll take your breath away.
This machine makes no practical sense whatsoever, but it's more than just status symbol. Not a jewel to be stroked and admired, It's a tool to be used, and when properly used, it connects the driver to a great Italian tradition of technology and design. It brings out the Italian in us.
One word distinguishes the American Express card from the others. Member.
I hear the choreography.
To us, Mr. Ryan is a member.
So excited.
And at American Express, our card members are entitled to a world of privileges.
Don't stop now. You gotta keep it going all night.
We lost our card, our cash.
Even our passport. You've come to the right place. I can help you.
That's great.
That's glad we stayed an extra day.
I'm glad we have the American Express card. She's so lovely.
She reminds me of you.
Members carry our promise of respect, recognition, unsurpassed personal service. Membership has its privileges. To apply by phone, call 1-800-THE-CARD.
60 Minutes, a CBS News weekly magazine, will continue.
He killed your sister, Marcus.
Does a cop ever have a right to revenge? You got a search warrant?
Do we need one?
Cagney and Lacey, Monday.
Americans, we know who we are. And when it comes to news, we know who we trust. Dan Rather, weeknights on the CBS Evening News.
This is CBS.
Now, Subaru cash rebates direct to you up to $1,500. Get your check today. Plus, low 4.9 APR financing on all new Subaru models can save you hundreds more. Plus, Subaru 550 protection plan on all new Subarus. It all adds up to one of the best new car deals in America. Cash rebates up to $1,500 direct to you. Plus, 4.9 financing. Plus, Subaru 550 protection plan. Plus, a new quality-built Subaru. Exclusive only at your New York, New Jersey Subaru dealers.
Is he the kidnapper or the wrong man? Monday at 4:30.
If they think about it at all, most people assume that polygamy, a man with more than one wife, is a dead issue, at least in the United States, where it's illegal in all 50 states and against federal law, too. But as we reported last October, it's no dead issue in Colorado City, Arizona. It's a way of life. The founders of that community found a place so remote and so hard to get at that they thought the government would leave them alone to live their lives according to their beliefs. It's worked, mostly. Except for some fruitless attempts years back to enforce the marriage law, the state of Arizona has left them alone, and they've sort of flourished. They call themselves fundamentalist Mormons, and they live in the largest polygamous community in the United States. The polygamists in Colorado City, 3,500 of them now, were forced out of mainstream Mormonism when the church outlawed polygamy over 100 years ago. They've been technically breaking the law ever since. Here in Colorado City, this is the biggest celebration of the year. It's Leroy Johnson's 98th birthday party. His followers believe he is God's man on earth. They call him Uncle Roy, or the Prophet. 2 years ago, he married wife number 16. When anybody gets married in Colorado City, it's at Roy Johnson's direction, or at least with his approval.
Now, you've got 2 lovely wives, which you might call sort of modified polygamy. I mean, you haven't ever thought of having 12 or 15 or 20. Well, maybe you have. I don't know. Well, you don't have 12 or 15. Yeah, well, what I'm getting at is the smaller plural marriage family a fact of life?
There's 2 here, that's all I'll say.
Don Timpson had a dozen or more mothers and 79 brothers and sisters, and his father spent time in jail for violating the laws against polygamy. Don, carrying on the plural marriage tradition, doesn't need to worry about jail, not in Roy Johnson's community. His 2 wives are Janet, whom Don married in church and also with civil legal approval, and Mary, who was married only in a religious ceremony, equally binding to Don.
Am I right in saying that the basic reason or justification for plural marriages is religious?
You are absolutely right.
My relationship with Don is separate
from Janet. And you have to think in terms of that.
What's your relationship with Janet?
She's a sister. Sister wife, we say.
She's a sister who sleeps with your husband.
But a sister, yeah. She definitely sleeps with my husband. She has 4 children.
But it is strange to most of the people in this country.
We don't have the same kind of conditioning. And so, you know, all of the people out there who are involved in monogamous relationships are conditioned in that way. We're not.
If conditioning, as Don Timpson says, has helped the younger generations keep the faith, there's also the power of the prophet. But how does this openly polygamous town get away with breaking the law? The elected mayor, Dan Barlow, has 5 wives.
I think the governor of Arizona said about Colorado City, leave them alone, they're good people. Is that right?
Basically, that's what he's said, and most all officials have taken that position in a world, in a day in which we live. Of course, it'd be the height of folly to censor a man that strengthened his home with more than one mother.
You swore to uphold the laws of not only of Colorado City, but of the state of Arizona and the United States.
Why, of course.
And you are a believer in plural marriage. You don't see any conflict in that.
I see no conflict in a man living his religion.
Mayor Barlow is one of a number of Barlows who are as near as Colorado City comes to movers and shakers. The manager of the only store is a Barlow. The manager of the only factory. The superintendent of schools. And with the incorporation of the town, the only full-time police officer is a Barlow. These Barlows are all sons of Roy Johnson's predecessor as prophet. So, while they are the visible holders of secular power, they are also, more importantly, the top layer of the religious oligarchy. As Roy Johnson's health declines, they increasingly speak for him. The dissidents in the community, and there are some, say that disagreeing with Roy Johnson and the Barlows can get you in a lot of trouble. Take Cannell and Trudy Bateman. They feel like victims of religious blackmail. They say Uncle Roy told Cannell to leave Trudy after Trudy ruled out polygamy for her husband.
I was planning on having 40, 50 kids. That's the way it was.
It's quite an ambition.
It was, and I wanted as many wives as the Lord wanted me to, which is through Roy Johnson, you know, and because I felt like, and I was taught that I did not get any blessings but through Roy Johnson.
You married him with your eyes wide open. You knew how he felt, and you weren't going to give him 40 or 50 kids. You knew there might be some other wives on the horizon.
You bet.
And did you think you could live with that?
I thought I could live with it until about a week after I was married. And then I realized what love was really about. And I was in total shock. I had no idea.
If it took Trudy a week to reject the belief she'd lived with from childhood, it took Cannell 11 years. But he was awfully fond of Trudy and didn't want to lose her, even at the cost of giving up the idea of 50 children and the religion he was born into. What has defying Roy Johnson done to their life in the community?
People don't bother us much. They
shun us.
They really do.
Because they've been told in church that we're fighting against Roy, fighting against God. And we're outwardly fighting against Roy, which is our God.
If that sounds extreme to you, this was recorded at a church service in 1985. Uncle Roy was talking to the faithful about the dissidents in the community.
They're fighting against God, not me. And they better look out, because if they push it any farther, God will lay a heavy hand on their shoulders. And he's dictating my words at the present time.
For Cannell and Trudy, this is no longer just a religious fight. It's also an economic battle. They put every penny they had into the community and into their house.
If you could sell this house and get the money yourself, would you leave?
We probably would. Yeah. But we can't without the money.
And there's the catch. Although Canal Bateman donated 7 years of labor to the community and has put almost $40,000 of his own money and years of labor into this house, it isn't his. It belongs to a trust, controlled by the same religious leaders who control the rest of the town. A lot of Colorado City just doesn't look finished. It isn't. There's evidence of loving hands construction on most of the houses. For good reason. Families keep getting bigger with new wives and more children, and additions to the houses try to keep pace. But it's sweat that produces no equity. The land and whatever's built on it remains the property of the trust. The trust controls the houses of even long-established successful families, like the Coxes. 1 man, 2 wives, 19 children. Husband and both wives say they no longer believe in polygamy, but they're used to each other and will live out their lives without a plural divorce. What they resent is Roy Johnson's control over everyone in town.
We were brainwashed to the point where everything that Uncle Roy said was right. And there's been men in this community that have made the statement, if Uncle Roy told them to go and kill somebody, they'd do it.
The Coxes fear that kind of statement and the monolithic religious power in the community. But what they fear most is that after 24 years, they might be forced out of their home.
In August of '84, Leroy Johnson sent one of my sons to me with a message saying, if you believe everything that I say, come over and tell me about it, and tell me so. And we'll get you rebaptized, reordained, and everything will be hunky-dory. If you don't do this, you'll be asked to leave your place. You'll be asked to move out. And if you don't move out, you'll be stricken with the scourge of desolation, and you'll have a heart attack and die.
Although the Cox family is still living in their house, they know that at any time an eviction notice could arrive, and they know that some other family in good standing with the religious leaders would be given their home. The Coxes say they won't leave without a fight.
We sacrificed, our kids have sacrificed, and to take this away from us and give it to someone who hasn't earned it, you know, where else in America would someone do that to you?
This is all because we don't unconditionally believe everything that old man is saying.
Mayor Barlow has little sympathy for the dissenters.
And so if a person builds on a piece of land that belongs to a trust or to another person, when you walk away, you leave whatever is there. And these laws are well defined. And if there's people in our community that have a gripe and a complaint, why don't they go ahead and take it to the law and have it adjudicated?
The mayor is referring to the laws of Arizona. The community accepts state laws, except where they interfere with religious principles. Although the few who have lost the faith have considered taking the issue to court, their problem is money. They haven't got it, and the trust does. What would it take to make you shut up?
I would like a deed to this place. We would like a deed to this place. And I'd like to see it happen that nobody was forced into a marriage that they didn't want to be in.
I was down in the creek, and my dad come down and found me, and he told me, he says, either you're getting married or you're going to go to the mental hospital.
Flora Jessup was 16 6 months ago when she married her first cousin, Philip. Did they tell you why they were asking you to marry Philip?
Just basically because, well, if you're caught talking to somebody, you know, it's like you're considered having sex with him.
And you were caught talking to her?
Yes, I was.
But you weren't having sex with it?
No.
If there'd been someone you had really liked and wanted to get married, would your folks have listened to you and maybe picked him?
I don't think so, because any of the guys I would have wanted to marry were not in the religion. As far as I was concerned, they were going to give me to some older man that would be able to control me, because my family really could not control me.
Flora stayed with her new husband only 6 days. Now, still legally married, she lives with new friends in Kansas City. Would she go back?
There's not a chance that I'll go back there. I will go back and see my family, but there's not any chance. Nobody has to worry about me going back and living there.
If there are other women who have been forced into marriages they don't want, they don't talk about it unless they run away as Flora did. For those who are happy in the faith, there is every outward sign they hope their children and their children's children will carry on the polygamous tradition. But some believers think outside government influence has already begun to corrupt the paradise they work to build. With the incorporation, Colorado City is newly eligible for all kinds of goodies from the public treasury. For the first time this year, more than $500,000 in state funds will come in. Heber Hammond, a sincere believer and philosopher of the polygamous community, doesn't think there is such a thing as a free lunch.
I think it's an established fact that when you start taking public funds, there's strings attached and there's no way to cut them. And I think that those strings interfere in our religion and in our practice of our religion and doing the things that we've traditionally done.
Heber Hammond thinks in 20 years there will be very little polygamy left in Colorado City, that it will be just another desert town. Last November, the religious leader, Uncle Roy, died, leaving the community divided. That continues to be the case, and there's some evidence of the outside world encroaching on Colorado City. Next month, Arizona officials will hear evidence against one of the Barlow brothers and will decide whether or not he can be a certified police officer, considering, among other things, his admitted polygamous life. And a county supervisor is asking the Attorney General to investigate what he believes is a tremendous abuse of taxpayer dollars in Colorado City. The Attorney General is considering an investigation.
Okay, it's decided. And a man refrigerator.
Right on.
So what do you think, freezer on the top or on the side?
Either way.
Of course, Amanda also makes one with a freezer on the bottom.
Good.
Nope. Let's get one on the side with an ice maker.
Aren't you going a little overboard? I mean, it's just a refrigerator.
A man isn't really that expensive. Besides, you didn't think buying that giant screen TV was going overboard.
How can you compare a refrigerator with a necessity of life?
When you know exactly what you want, Amana. Say you're Peter Barg of International Paper. You're out of town taking care of a customer. But who's taking care of your customers while you're not there? An electronic order exchange system. It lets your customers use AT&T 800 service to link their PCs to International Paper's database, so they can track their own orders. From equipment to networking, from computers to communications.
Under control? Great. I'll be back in the office Tuesday morning.
AT&T is the right choice.
Sehen Sie sich bloß einmal diese rohe Kraft. Der Mann ist wie eine menschliche Kanone. Er explodiert.
Every major government is spending millions getting ready for next year's Olympics. Except one. In America, Olympians don't depend on the government. They depend on you. Through July 4th, buy Miller High Life or Light Beer where you see this special refund offer and help Miller support the U.S. Olympic Training Centers, where Olympians are made the American way.
The story of a remarkable boy and an extraordinary animal
Toby, this thing can talk.
in a world that couldn't understand. A Summer to Remember, Tuesday.
Wednesday, the Iron Curtain opens. For one historic week, CBS News talked directly with Russian citizens, uncensored.
This is a new beginning, isn't it? It's a remarkable new beginning.
Unprecedented. Join Dan Rather and a team of correspondents inside the Soviet Union. 7 days in May, a CBS News special Wednesday.
Time once again for a few minutes with Andy Rooney.
Have you noticed that nothing is anyone's fault anymore? Everything is someone else's fault. No one's ever to blame. No young person has done anything wrong in the United States in the last 25 years. He's a youth. The parents of the boy who holds up the corner grocery store say he's a good boy who got in with the wrong crowd. It's the wrong crowd's fault. Although you notice the wrong crowd didn't hold up the grocery store, the good boy did. Alcoholics are no longer to be blamed for drinking too much. They have a disease. The murderer isn't responsible because he was legally insane at the time. Big business blames its problems on big government, foreign imports, and the economy. The labor unions blame their problems on big business. It isn't even a little bit the fault of U.S. automakers and American workers that they've lost 25% of their market to Japan. President Reagan is concerned about the increased use of drugs, but neither the president or anyone else blames the people who actually buy and use drugs. It isn't their fault. It's the fault of the dealers, the smugglers, or the farmers back in Colombia. God forbid we should blame the innocent people actually taking the drugs. They're victims. School children are using drugs, but they aren't to blame, and neither are their parents. It's the fault of the dealers selling it to the kids. President Reagan says we're going to increase our efforts to enforce our drug laws, but there aren't enough people in the whole United States Army, Navy, and Marine Corps to prevent smugglers from bringing drugs into this country. How come it never occurs to anyone that the best way to end the drug problem would be for individuals to stop using them? We're becoming a nation of people who don't feel responsible for anything. Suppose these comments may not be very popular, but don't blame me. The devil made me do it.
I'm Ed Bradley. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes.
Which car owners just love to brag about reliability and dependability? Toyota Camry owners. So it's not surprising they tell the most amazing stories of the unbelievable feeling of security they have driving their Camrys. Presenting the 1987 Toyota Camry. More power, handsome new styling. An amazing car gets even better. Who could ask for anything more? Toyota.
Looking for a home with Greg was like everything else in our marriage. I wanted this. He wanted that. We both won.
We're America's home sellers. Coldwell Banker, a member of the Sears Financial Network.
Some vacations are perfectly safe, but not this one. It could happen to you. So don't carry cash, carry American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
What's this about new berry swirl ice cream bars?
We put the ice cream in, we put the berries on top, we put more ice cream in, and we swirl it all about. We call them berry swirl bars and ice cream berry snack. That's what it's all about.
New Carnation Berry Swirl Bars. Creamy vanilla ice cream and strawberries swirled together in one delicious ice cream bar. And it's only 70 calories.
New berry swirl ice cream bars.
Guarda ma lettore, se non costa sedile, ma anche le che... Costa di meno, costerà 250. Oh, ma prima, perché aprite?
When her life was shattered, she was left with nothing except her will to fight. Margot Kidder and James Farentino star in Picking Up the Pieces later tonight. But first, Jessica focuses on the death of a television personality. Next on Murder, She Wrote.
But you eject the other way, you know, for you. Yo, fellas, anybody want to take a ride? The keys are in it. No, the guy must not know New York too well, man, to be leaving keys in the back of the car.
For a printed transcript of this or any edition of 60 Minutes, send $3 to 60 Minutes Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
This is CBS.
Hi, Coach. Your goalie here hasn't let up on me all week.
New York Telephone presents a Get Rid of the Guilt call.
Well, it's been bugging me that I said I was too busy to help.
There's no need to feel guilty about not calling with New York Telephone's low regional calling rates.
You still need another coach, right? Sign me up.
Don't wait. Call. You'll be glad you did.
This is a brief test for investors. Do you see a meal or a gold mine? A running shoe or a runaway success? At Merrill Lynch, we not only recognize financial opportunities, we create them. So if you're looking for tax-free or other high-yield investments that are liquid and diversified for safety, call us. Now, what do you see? A phone number or an opportunity?
Call 1-800-MERRILL for more information. Merrill Lynch Unit Investment Trust.
Put the puzzle together on Wheel of Fortune, weeknights at 7:30.